Hi, welcome to Classic Cars Driven. My name's Matt Nichols, and today we're driving an absolute motoring icon, the original Fiat 500. Launched in 1957, the Fiat 500 was designed to answer the question on mass producing small economical cars for the post-war era. Things were hard, people still needed to move around, but what they needed was cheap transport. I think it's fair to say that the Fiat 500 really is the original city car. It preceded the Mini by about 2 years. Like I said, launched in 1957. It actually went on to being produced until 1975, selling nearly 4 million models. Launched originally with a 470cc engine, producing just 13 horsepower. Power has increased on the second generation cars to 18 horsepower and a 499cc engine, which is the same as in this car. This car being a 1966 F derivative, which means it has normal forward opening doors rather than the original suicide doors. It has rectangular rear lights and also somewhat simplified styling. There's some grills missing underneath the front lights, for instance. The interior was kept fairly basic, and on this particular model we have a single round speedometer, which also has key warning lights for things like oil pressure, the ignition warning light, and also fuel level. There is no fuel gauge in this car. One of the novelties and enjoyments of owning a Fiat 500 is the wheel brace doubles up as a quick fuel level check, in case you're not sure how much is left in the tank. The tank, of course, being very small, crammed in the front boot space, which it shares with a spare wheel, no less. Inside, things are quite tight, there's no question about that. I think the original average showed 4 adults in the car. They must have been of a very small size and scale. But that doesn't mean it's not practical, the Fiat 500. There's some lovely little touches. For instance, the rear bench seat folds flat to give you a luggage compartment instead. There is a tiny bit of space left in the boot in between the fuel tank and the spare wheel, but not much. I think it's safe to assume that everything you're transporting is inside the car, which, for instance, if there are 2 of you, no problem at all. Front seats for occupants and the rear for anything you want to take with you. Mechanically, it's absolutely brilliant. In the back is a 2-cylinder, 4-stroke, air-cooled 499cc engine. The idea taken, of course, from the Volkswagen Beetle, delivering in this particular F model 18 horsepower, which doesn't sound like anything at all. But interestingly, as the name 500 suggests, the car only weighs 500 kilos. The gearbox is a 4-speed affair with a reverse, and it's got a lovely mechanical feel. The only thing, and this definitely takes you back to realising you are driving something from a bygone era, is there's absolutely no synchromesh in any gears. So when you're changing up or down, it's a case of double declutching. I must admit, on the time I spent with this car today, changing up is not too bad. Changing down is a problem. Front speedo is a giant steering wheel, which means power assistance is not required. The wheel gives you enough leverage to move comfortably from lock to lock, and wall to lock as well. If you want to turn around in a sort of A-row type situation, you don't need to use any additional space. The car will simply pivot around on its axis in incredibly tight turning circle. Being helped greatly by its quite short 9'9" length, and of course slightly shorter than that wheelbase. when you are accelerating, if that is a term that you can associate with an original Fiat 500, there is actually in reality only a very tight envelope that the engine works within. So a small engine does conjure up a picture of something that might be high revving, but in reality you do have to work within quite this narrow window, and there's some indicators on the speedometer that suggest the maximum speed that you should be travelling in each gear. If you do exceed that accidentally or any other way, the engine sort of fizzles out. So it gives you fair warning that no, that really is everything it's got to give. But I still think it's surprising that with just 18 horsepower, and that was the figure when new, so with a little bit of wear and tear, you can only assume that a car at this stage of its life will have less than that. It does pop along okay. On this car there is a little bit of play in the steering. I don't know how representative that is of other cars, but again, at that slightly reduced pace that you're travelling at, it doesn't really matter. Just call them features. There are some lovely ones which I really like. For instance, starting a car, it's all to do with two levers on the floor between the two front seats. One is the choke and one is the starter motor. So the starting procedure is basically switching on the ignition key on the dash with the ignition light on, choosing a choke setting, and then pulling up the starter motor lever, which turns the engine over, and it sort of gradually fires into life. You can then set the choke to what you feel is appropriate, and then obviously as you're driving it, release the choke gradually, and then basically enjoy the rest of your journey. The other feature I like is there's an idle setting. There's a lever under the dash, top dead centre in the car, and what that does is it creates a sort of artificial position for the accelerator pedal. In fact, when you're moving the lever, you can watch the pedal move. And what that means is if you don't like the idle being too low, you can simply elevate it up a bit so that you don't stall at junctions. Again, a useful feature, particularly when the engine's a bit cold and you're manoeuvring in a town centre, for instance. But all very, very basic stuff. You have absolutely got to love it. There's also the half folding sunroof. It's quite a common feature you see on the modern derivative of the Fiat 500, so it's clearly something stolen as a feature. But on early cars there was an option for the roof to fold all the way back, but on the sort of later cars, this one included the F model, there wasn't, and so what you end up with is a half folding roof. Everything put together means this car is literally a smile a mile. I'm Matt Nichols. You've been watching ClassicCarsDriven.com, and today we've been driving the iconic Fiat 500 F.